Hey there, welcome to the Reinsurance Podcast, the place where we dive into all things reinsurance, the coolest part of insurance. We're your hosts, Jerad and Ben, a couple of ex-practitioners who loved the industry so much we founded Supercede to tackle some of its biggest headaches. And we're here to share our insights and stories with expert guests as we uncover what's really going on in the industry.
Welcome back, everybody. Super excited today because we are here with Reg Brown, chairman of the Insurance Museum, to dive into probably one of my favourite projects currently going on around the London and beyond insurance market. So welcome, Reg. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you for joining.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Super excited about this conversation. We're both a bit of insurance, reinsurance nerds, which originates from the history of the industry and everything else. So we're excited to tuck into the museum and what you're working on there. But first, we always like to ask the guests like how you got into the insurance industry. Full stop.
I think like far too many of us, I fell into it by chance. None of my family knew anything about insurance, and nor did I. But it started, I think, when I was at my secondary school, trying to get 5 O-levels. But I was a hopeless student. I always describe myself as a slow learner and a late developer. So I was trying to get 5 O-levels, and I only managed 1 on the first attempt. So my parents and the school agreed I should stay on another year to get the other 4. Well, come the Christmas exams, I got another 1. So that I got 2 by then. And I tried for the other 3 on the following summer. And one of the subjects was French, and I was so bad at French that the headmaster got fed up with me and said he was determined to get me through it. So the rest of that year I studied French in his office, in his study. So, but he got me through, thank goodness.
Good.
By then I was 17, not a clue what I wanted to do. A couple of things attracted me. I wanted to be a journalist, but I had an uncle on the Daily Telegraph who said you'll have to learn shorthand if you want to be a journalist. And I thought, I'm no good at exams. I can't do more exams. So I gave that up. And the idea of being an accountant was rather posh. So I thought I'd be an accountant. Then somebody says, oh, you've got to do 5 nights a week studying to pass exams. I thought, I don't want any more exams. I don't want to. So, in those days we had what's called a youth employment officer. And I went to see a youth employment officer. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, no idea. And he said, well, there's a company here looking for a bright young man to be an insurance clerk. And I said, I don't know about the bright stuff, but I'm young enough and I'll give it a go. So I went for the interview, bought myself off-the-peg suit from Fleet Street, as a tie, as one had to, and I got the job. And this was in a Reliance fire and accident in Cannon Street. And after a while, people started saying to me, are you going to take the exams, Reg? And I said, what exams? Nobody told me about the exams at the interview. Anyway, for the first 2 years, I wasted my time and everybody else's time by going to Euston College doing evening classes, where most people were reading the daily newspaper and not paying attention to the lecturer. And so I failed, and then I decided the only person's time I'm wasting is my own. So I decided to give it a go, a real go, and stop wasting my time. The best thing I ever did was to join the Chartered Insurance Institute, which was quite interesting because when I got the papers, there were for the job, fill in an application form for the job. Amongst the papers was an application to join the Chartered Insurance Institute. And the treasurer of my youth club is a famous man in Lloyd's called Henry Chester. But at the time, I thought Henry would know the answer. So I said, who's this mob, Henry? And he said, I don't know, Reg, I have no idea. And he lied because I subsequently discovered he was a lecturer for the CII on marine insurance, and he ran a marine syndicate. His family had the Chester Syndicate at Lloyd's. So I decided it must be a trade union And a bit like the print, in those days, if you weren't a member of Nat Soper, you couldn't work in the print. And I'd been to a couple of dinners where people would disappear, and I'd say, where are they going? And they'd say, up to Fleet Street to sign on and then come back for the rest of the dinner. And that's how it worked in those days for the press. And I thought, oh, maybe insurance is something like the press. I've got to be a member of the trade union. So I joined the Chartered Insurance Institute thinking it was a trade union. Best thing I ever did, because the CII became a passion of mine throughout my career and supported me throughout my career very well. So anyway, I decided I got to stop messing around, and I started to study seriously. And that's when I started to believe that I was a slow learner and a late developer. So I started to pass the exams. And what the challenge for me was to have letters behind my name. You know, the idea of being an ACII sounded rather posh for an East End kid, you know, get letters behind your name. That was my target. Well, eventually I got to the last 3 exams in the associateship, and I failed one. So I couldn't put the letters behind my name. But the CII allowed me to take 2 fellowship subjects, because there was always that big debate. A lot of people stop at ACII, they've got the letters behind their name. That's it, the object achieved. So I sort of took those other 2 exams along with the one I failed, and I passed all 3. So by then I was 2 out of the 5 subjects to get the fellowship. And I thought, oh, that's even posher. So I carried on and I got the fellowship. What I didn't realise then, that I had become a professional student. I'd really learnt how to enjoy studying. And the fellowship, the subjects that I enjoyed most doing the exams was the legal subjects. And somebody I was working with at the time said his cousin had gone back to Africa with a law degree and would live the life of a king in Africa. And I thought, law degree, that sounds interesting. So I realised that I could sign up as an external student of London University using my fellowship as a proof of that I wasn't such an idiot after all. And so they allowed me to sign up for an external law degree. And 5 years later, I taught myself law and I passed the law degree. So I then became LLB FCII.
Goodness me.
That, of course, stood me in good stead when I subsequently became a Lloyd's underwriter and writing legal liability business.
Very interesting. And then what was your sort of fascination with the history of the market and your sort of desire now to lead into the museum?
The history of the market, I mean, I wasn't particularly interested in it until later on in my career, when I was looking towards retirement and you know, I really enjoyed my career in insurance. I mean, I think it was just such a fabulous career. I started doing a lot of mentoring with kids at Tower Hamlets College and Lloyd's in the community and things like that. And I used to take the youngsters tour of Lloyd's and to the Bank of England Museum. And whilst the tour of Lloyd's was always interesting because it is so unique, they showed more interest in the museum, the Bank of England Museum. It's a fabulous museum. And I would come out of the Bank of England Museum with I sometimes have to drag them out, feeling jealous. I mean, you know, I'd say to myself, we insurers are just important as those wretched bankers. Why haven't we got a museum like this? So it was at that stage that I started to think we need an insurance museum, because frankly there's nowhere for kids to go to discover what insurance is all about.
That's completely true.
And their parents know better idea either, and the teachers aren't much better informed. So I decided then that it wouldn't be a bad idea to have an insurance museum. Well, the trigger came when Sean Fisher, the chief executive of the CII, sold Aldermanbury to the City Corporation. And Sean said to me, well, what should I do with all these heritage items we've got dotted all over the building, where we've got nowhere to house it in our new office in Lombard Street. And I said straight away, open a museum, put them on display. Because although the CII had a museum at the time, it was on the second floor. And I don't know whether you're familiar with the old Aldermanbury building. Nobody ever went there. Nobody actually knew it was there. The public weren't allowed in. It was only members who went there. Most of the CII members are all over the country and the rest of the world. So it was hardly ever used. And then I began to think, well, we should have these items on public display to encourage kids to think about them. Then, I looked at Aviva, and Aviva have got the best collection of heritage items because there's so many British companies within Aviva, and it's all underground in Norwich. And so I'd take myself up to Norwich and have a look. I talk to Lloyd's and say, where's all your stuff? Underground in Lloyd's, the public can't get in, and so on. I think, what a waste of all this stuff.
What sort of items were there?
Well, the old fire helmets and fire engine uniforms and things like that. Somewhere there's a recovered satellite, I'm sure.
True.
Sort of research done by the Postal Museum is that people do like to see the physical object.
Oh, absolutely.
They're quite happy to watch the video, the thing going round on a pedestal, but they rather see the real thing.
Yeah.
So I'm still committed to opening a physical museum. So that we can have real things in it. And there's a great mate of mine who's got a brilliant collection. He spent his whole career collecting things. Brian Sharp. Brian's got his own personal museum down in Wye in Kent, above his garage. And Brian's in his 90s now. And when he was much younger, he bought an old AA low loader and would load an old fire engine on the back and go to all the country fairs up and down the country. And he's still got some of those things in his own personal museum in Wye. And it's a fabulous little museum. And I said to him when I went, Brian, how many people a year do you get to come here? Oh, about a dozen.
Yeah.
And I think, what a waste.
You get more than that in central London.
We need to be somewhere where people can see. So we've set our target as a physical museum in EC3, the insurance district. Not that we want to represent only the London insurance market, because we want to represent life and pensions. We want to represent, all the other things that the insurance business does. So it needs to be an EC3, we think, insurance district. And, we've got to pick up all the tourists that go by and so on. But the idea is simply to try and attract young people to think of insurance as a career of choice rather than a career of chance. I mean, I know I fell into it, but I'd like other people to choose to come into it.
Absolutely.
I think when you look at the history of this industry, it highlights it's so intriguing, the things that it was the driver behind that people might have not been aware of. And if you're young and you learn that fire departments were introduced as a result of these things and all, that creates a sense oh, that's kind of cool. It's not just this stale, stodgy, you just sell car policies on the internet, but there's actually real purpose behind why this industry has done these certain things, and journeys to discovering countries that were possible because of insurance, and sort of the history of unlocking the world in so many ways.
Well, one of our challenges is because insurance covers everything all of our lives from the cradle to the grave, and people don't understand that. We grow up. I mean, one of the big issues at the moment is pensions. Most people think the state pension is unsurvivable. We can't afford it. And there's all this fuss going on about in the papers today about the ladies who weren't told their pension age was going to be 66, not 60, and all of that. Well, lots of young kids, especially my sort of young kids growing up in the poor districts of London, the East End, assume at the end of their career the government will look after them and give them a state pension. Well, it ain't going to be enough to live on. It's hardly going to be enough to buy a packet of cigarettes every week at the current rate, and because we're all living longer. So there's a great ABI one-liner that I use, how many people know that insurers pay more in pensions per day than the government does?
Wow.
Now, I find that to be a staggering statement.
Indeed.
Having grown up thinking, the state will look after me in my dotage. Well, of course, we can't afford it anymore. And people have got to look after themselves. So I'm a mad, keen campaigner for financial literacy being taught in schools at the youngest age possible.
Yeah.
And one of our challenges at the museum is, well, at what age? Who do we want to come into the museum to learn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of research that somebody the other week published a piece that said 36% of 7 and 8 year olds have already decided on their career paths. Now that's an incredible sum. But I was lucky enough to be a guest at the Old Bailey the other week, where the sheriff hosts lunches with the Old Bailey there. I had a lady judge on my right and a male judge on my left, and I said to the lady judge, why did you choose the law? What brought you here? And she said she knew at the age of 9 that she wanted to be a barrister.
Yeah.
So we've got to sort of target kids at the age of 9. We can't let them get older than that before we've sort of given them an idea. And then gentleman on my left, lovely male judge of my vintage, I said, and what about you? And he said, at the age of 9, I didn't know what a barrister was. Yeah. And he decided he didn't change his idea about the law until he was at university, when he was doing some sort of engineering course, and he didn't like it. So he decided to study law instead. So it was much later in life that and look at me, I was 17 before I thought insurance, I'll do that.
Yeah.
I guess building these resources and making them available to all sorts of people will make a massive difference.
Yes,
towards people
and because we know that young children. I mean, there's one of our supporters, Samantha Ridgewell. She says that her 5-year-old daughter wants to be a hairdresser, and she said, "Why?" Because it's an environment she knows and likes.
Yeah.
And she says, I'm looking forward to the time when I hear a 5-year-old wants to work in insurance.
Yeah.
Well, if we don't get in touch with 5-year-olds, but they've got to grow up being comfortable with it. And people who influence them most are parents, of course, and Samantha taken her 5-year-old to the hairdressers quite a lot. And so that became familiar. The teachers, and, relatives generally, and so on. So we're developing a schools program so that we can educate teachers that insurance is a career path that they could teach their kids something about.
Makes sense.
Is there any specific thing, if you look at sort of like of all the things you'd want to put in a museum, like either an item or two that would be so exciting for you?
I got two answers to that. One is one of my donors that says that he has a piece of moon rock in his office, given to him by Neil Armstrong.
Wow.
And how lovely it would be if we had an office or a museum in London where the East End kids could come and see this bit of moon rock that wouldn't be there without insurance.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what moon rock looks like, and I don't know how you could prove it was a bit of moon rock and how you could prove that Neil Armstrong did give it to him.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it's a fabulous story.
Yeah.
Insurance is full of stories. And the other one is, I was in touch recently with Stephen Merritt. I don't know the name you probably heard of, but Stephen was Merritt Syndicates at Lloyd's and was in satellite insurance in the early part of that class of business. And Stephen got in touch with me and he said, Reg, I've still got artifacts from the occasion when two satellites went adrift up in space, and the satellite insurers had paid the claim. And Stephen said, I think we can go and rescue these satellites. And he spoke to the market, and most of the market said, yeah, Stephen, go. We'll pay for it. Yeah, go. Yeah. Get the recovery. Some of the London market refused, but he had enough support to go to America, sign up a crew and send up a spaceship to rescue the 2 satellites, which they did.
Incredible, isn't it?
And they brought them back to Earth. And he thought, what am I going to do with 2 second-hand satellites? Well, he sold them on site, and they got most of their loss paid back.
Amazing.
Wow.
So that's a hell of a story. And so Stephen says, I'm still in touch with the crew, and I've still got some artifacts from that event.
Yeah.
And that's a great story. I mean, how many kids know?
Yeah.
I mean, that should inspire an awful lot of aspirant spacemen out there, little lads wanting to be a spaceman and so on. Yeah. So, I mean, there is an awful lot. I mean, one of my great mates is Julian Radcliffe, who runs the Art Loss Register, among other things. And, you know, we were having lunch with Julian the other day, and we're going to do something for the what he calls exotic insurance, but it might be to do with art loss. But he, you know, he's got this database, and he's also got the watch register, and you know they've got this database recording stolen art, so that it can be identified, and the watches can be identified by their serial numbers and things like that, and they recover lost and stolen items, and you know that is part of the business that most people aren't familiar with, and because Julian also started off control risks. Control risks were one of the first loss adjusting companies, if I can call them that, who were engaged in kidnap and ransom.
Yeah.
Because kidnap insurers and my syndicate did kidnap and ransom insurance. You know, we try and make it clear that we don't actually negotiate with or pay the people who are demanding the ransom. The family do that, or the insured does that, and then we reimburse the insured. Yeah. So it's not an easy way of making money, but there's got to be enough money to pay the ransom and then reclaim on the insurance policy. But the negotiations is all done by a specialist loss adjusting company, and you know we used other negotiators to negotiate, you know, release of our clients who'd been kidnapped.
Yeah, astonishing, isn't it? And obviously, a lot of this idea for the Insurance Museum and the stories you've been telling came about at a time where we've just been through a global pandemic, and you know, lots of things couldn't happen in real life. So I thought maybe you could share a bit about what you've been doing instead and since then.
I mean, I'm not sure that we want to put some sort of disease. Well, I mean, you know, this comes into one of the things I say to some of these youngsters. If I was coming into the insurance business today, which is the sort of, I think, the question you're alluding to, you know, what would we be doing? And I would advise kids, you know, to study technology, and because cybercrime is going to grow and grow and grow. So there's one instance of research. The other one is sort of progress in medicine and maybe trying to stop what are the future pandemics and how they're going to spread. You know, there's a lot in the banking industry that needs these better research and so on. And I always say to them that if you pick on a subject that interests you, there's something in insurance for it. Yeah. And, you know, if you can make yourself the most informed person in that area, you'll be worth something. You'll have something to offer an insurer and employer. And, you know, I was listening to Radio 4 a few years ago, and they introduced the world's leading expert on garden snails.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, who grows up wanting to be an expert on garden snails? And he was saying that garden snails have a homing instinct. And I thought, really? So if you toss them over the fence to next door's garden, they'll try and get back somehow. But, I mean, you know, there's some guy on the radio because he's the leading expert in garden. So I say, just pick on something that interests you and study it, learn it to the nth degree, so that you have a fountain of knowledge that people want to hear about. And
yeah, for sure.
Good.
And when we go back to the museum, you said you're working towards becoming like a physical space. Like, what is sort of the next couple steps? What are what's the journey that we're going on?
We started out, the CII sold Aldermanbury in 2018.
Yeah.
So we started out in 2018, going on 2019. And I decided that we needed to make sure that there was a thirst for a museum, an insurance museum. So we consulted all the trade associations, and there are more than you can shake a stick at.
Yeah.
They're all over the place. Anyway, so we consulted with them, and every one of them said, yes, please. So, and they allowed us to use their logo on our website that we were creating as supporters. Now, the trade associations don't have any money.
Yeah.
It's all their members' money. So they say it's up to our members to decide if they're going to support this venture with money. So we started to gather money. We started to get support from all and sundry, and quite a few insurers gave us money, the big brokers gave us money, and we did this feasibility study. We just sort of went on and said, how do we go about it and what do we do? So at the end of 2019, we published a feasibility study, and we were in touch with the City Corporation. We've been in touch with them all the way through. They desperately want it to happen because, destination city, they're all about building up the city, getting people in. But anyway, we were about to occupy a shop in Leadenhall Market, the old HMV shop. Don't know how familiar you are with the old and Waterstones were the landlord.
Yeah.
I mean, they had the two premises, and HMV moved out, and they were left with both leases and so on. So they wanted to get shot of the lease, and we held a thing in the Broker's Wine Bar. We got a lot of people who said they would give us money, and we entertained them in the wine bar, and then we said, come and have a look at what site we think we're going to occupy. So we took them over to the HMV shop. It was just big enough. It was good enough space for us to just get started.
Yeah.
Because, you've got to take one step at a time in everything you do, slowly, catchy monkey. So we took them over there, and everybody said, oh, yeah, that's good. But then along came COVID. And suddenly the City Corporation sort of said, oh, somebody's made a bid for the premises. And we said, really? Well, we were so delighted not to get that location because we'd have been spending rent for 2 years and nothing. Nobody was in the city. So we decided, what should we do rather than twiddle our thumbs? So we built a virtual museum on our website, and we had to choose a class of business to concentrate on, and that became fire insurance.
Yeah.
So we now have on the website 4 virtual fire insurance galleries in our virtual museum, dealing with the fire insurance from the Great Fire right through to 1929. 1929, because that is the last year when the insurance company Fire Brigade put out a fire, and that was the Norwich Union Fire Brigade in 1929. Then it became a national organisation. But Nicholas Barbon started his own fire office at the backside of the Royal Exchange, and I mean, there's some fabulous stories in there. So that was built, and it's now there. Gallery 4 is so long we made it Gallery 4A and 4B.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's worth watching. And at the end of Gallery 1, to attract the young viewers, there's a game that you can douse the fire game.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I urge you to play it.
Yeah.
You go at the end of Gallery 1, and it's a little lad who's around at the Great Fire, and the houses start to burn, and there's a supply of water at one end, and he's throwing his buckets at the houses to put them fire out. And, most of us keep forgetting, go and fill your bucket up again. So it got 3 goes and then the bucket's empty. So you've got to go and fill it up again. And I've got 19 fires as my record in the time. So at the end of the game, he's congratulated by the Mayor of London at the time and made an honorary waterman of the City of London. Because the watermen were the ones who were putting out the fires. They were the ones on the River Thames who could get the water to the location and actually knew how to play with water and deal with water and so on. So
sounds amazing. We'll put links to all this in our sort of notes, the show notes. What is the best way our listeners could support the?
Well, we need money.
Money.
We need money.
Yeah.
And we have a membership scheme where we're building up individual members. Members of the CII can join at 40 quid a year, non-members at 50 quid. And, you'll get our newsletter. We're trying to do some lectures or articles uniquely for the members only. People have made donations. We're looking for multi-year commitments because our target at the moment is we did stage 1, which was the virtual galleries. Stage 2 was a small start-up museum to try because we want to learn. We haven't run a museum before, so we're not so arrogant. We think we know how to do it all. So we want to learn with a small location, using the Bank of England Museum as a role model. I've done a Freedom of Information Act request from the bank, and I know how much it costs to run that museum, except they don't pay rent, and I've had to guess what rent they would pay. But it costs the bank, you, me and us as taxpayers, about $2 million a year to run that museum with 9 employees. And it's got a great school education program and so on. So that's my role model. So we think we could run a museum for about 3 or 4 years with 2 or 3 million quid in the bank. And that's our target. 3 million is our target. That would last us 3 or 4 years, if not 5, depending on the size. And it's a bit like saying what do you want to. But how much will a car cost? Well, it depends on what sort of car you want. So depending on where we had a look at several locations. We've been, the City Corporation have been very kind to us. We've rejected 1 or 2 suggestions because one was the wrong side of Leadenhall Street, would you believe? Because location. It's got to be in the right place. I recently had a look at a building called Sun Court, just off Cornhill. I tried to persuade the RSA that 1710 was when the Sun Fire Insurance Company started life, and this is Sun Court. I thought there's some commonality here. We could do some great things if the Sun were prepared to help sponsor us getting in there. But no, the big insurance companies are hopeless at moving. You talk to one person and they say, "Oh, it's not our responsibility." One of my problems is whose budget does it come from? And people keep telling me it's all budget driven. So I think, well, we tick all the R boxes: human resource, CSR, HR. And PR, sorry, and then human resource people say wonderful to take our new recruits to look at a physical museum. That would be great, and then they say, but aren't you going to let the public in? Yes, we're going to let. Oh, that's our CSR budget, isn't it? And the CSR say, I think this is PR, this is public relations. So you end up with some sort of sponsorship manager who always says to you, "Oh, I've allocated my allowance for this year." And it drives you round. You go round and round in circles.
Well, we'll promote it. We'll push it out. Hopefully, we'll get enough sort of interest and additional traction from our podcast, and we'll sort of back this. But it's been an absolute delight having you on the show, Reg.
There's quite a lot of there's a fair bit of money around. The worship company couple of insurers have got
There is indeed.
4 million quid in the bank there that I'd like to target, but they're a bit hard to get on side.
Yeah.
And we've got to justify that it's going to work,
Yeah.
and so we need to prove ourselves in that regard.
Yeah.
But the website is up and running, and the fire museum is there. Schools loving it. We're getting a lot of feedback from schools, and there's one lecturer, Peter Cave, who lectures on reinsurance, mostly in Singapore. Peter says to me, "Oh, Reg," he says, "such a wonderful museum. At the end of my lectures, I always tell my kids, if you want to learn about insurance, look at this museum."
Yeah.
Amazing.
Excellent.
Peter Cave's a good supporter.
Good. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. We'll send all the links to the so people can support. And thank you for your time, Reg. This has been delightful.
I mean, I'm just getting started.
Good stuff.
Thanks, Reg.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Reinsurance Podcast. If you enjoyed our show, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review to let us know how we're doing, preferably 5 stars. For more insights and updates, follow us on LinkedIn.